We hope you're enjoying your new year. And Don is here to talk about a particular term that gets tossed around by the religious.
That's right. That's right. I'm continuing a series that I've been calling the buzzwords of ignorance, and I've talked about the Christian nation before. I've talked about Judeo-Christian. I'm going to maybe hit a couple others in the next couple months. A buzzword of ignorance is, I've defined it to be words used for their emotional connotation where the speaker relies on the assumed ignorance of the audience who is being manipulated. So it's really a propaganda mechanism. And today I want to talk about the term sacred. Something is sacred, or sanctity, which kind of means the same thing. They're different connotations of pretty much the same word. Specifically, I want to talk about the Ground Zero, supposed Ground Zero Mosque being sacred. I want to talk about the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of human life. And what we'll see here is with all these cases, we see people asserting a claim of ownership or control without any real rational basis for that, or real honest actual claim, right? So it reminds me a lot of my little dog. I have a little poodle, and he likes, when we go out for walks, he likes to pee on bushes to mark his territory, and he's sort of telling the dog world that, hey, I own this house. And it's kind of like that. It's this little dog trying to assert his ownership over something that the humans don't necessarily agree to. So essentially, this is coveting, right? You're coveting somebody else's stuff, and which is of course prohibited by the Ten Commandments. But so there's a question for the audience: if believers don't follow their own God's law, why should anybody take your religion seriously? So let's jump right in. We have the supposed Ground Zero Mosque controversy in New York City, and this happened pretty recently, and there's been a lot of wasted airtime, I think, over this whole thing. But the gist of it is there's a proposed Muslim community center in a sort of dilapidated warehouse district in New York City, 2 blocks from the World Trade Center where there was this attack. And conservatives and religious nuts said, oh, we're going to lay claim to this area by claiming this whole area is sacred. And you get all sorts of quotes like this. This is from Family Security Matters. A woman writes, building the mosque on this location would be highly unethical and insensitive, ignores the idea of majority rule, and may cause riots and violent behavior due to the supposed hidden intentions of building this mosque and Islamic cultural center in such close proximity to the hallowed Ground Zero. So this is kind of the sentiment that you hear, is that Ground Zero is sacred. You're not supposed to do anything there. And what's really going on here is that none of the people making these claims has any ownership rights over that land. So really they're kind of fifth wheels out there spinning, and they're asserting some sort of mysterious boundary around Ground Zero that is sacred or whatever, and they're basically trying to, it's an emotional device used to prevent the creation of this thing. And so did you have something to say?
Yeah, on that quote, I don't want to sidetrack us, but I have a particular pet peeve.
Yeah.
And that is when somebody refers to this as a majority rule society.
Oh yeah, that's another little annoying thing. It's like majority rule. You know, how about the people that own the land? What don't they have a right to their land?
If you think that in the United States, if you think that you live in a majority rule society, you're simply wrong, and you need to take some time to re-educate yourself. We have this thing called the Constitution, which specifically exists to protect minorities from the whims of majorities. You do not live in a simple majority rule society. Now, it's true that by and large the majority is likely to get their way, and that's the case when you have a representative republic democracy, situation. But this idea about simple majority rule, or that the views of the majority should be preferred
at all costs,
at the expense of minorities, is ass backward of what the Constitution does. But
yeah. So this is a mechanism, I think, of asserting some sort of claim over this land. It's used to conflate the Muslims in general with Muslims who performed the attack on the World Trade Center, and it's not too different this conflating is not too different than blaming the Jews for Jesus' death and murdering Jews over the years, so as a way of atoning or fixing that the death of Jesus. So it's kind of lumping everything together. But when a Christian group does something wrong, it's never Christianity to blame, right? So if the Catholics are out molesting children, it's not Christians' fault at all. It's those Catholics over there. Or if it's the televangelists running con games, it's them over there. So there's a bit of a hypocrisy going on here. From an atheist perspective, Muslim, Jews, and Christians are all worship the God of Abraham. And the key idea here is, from the story of Abraham, is that, you're selling out your fellow man to curry favor with God. So Abraham, decided that, hey, maybe I can kill my kid as for God's orders and curry favor with God. Well, he didn't actually kill his kid, but he meant to, and that's all that mattered, and so he got a bunch of land. And so this is kind of what I consider the key tenet of Abrahamic religions, is selling out your fellow man to curry favor with God. And, atheists could play this sacred game too. We could claim that, hey, reality is sacred to us. We like reality. We're big into reality. And given that maybe since there was this horrible thing from these people, these Abrahamic followers, maybe we should prohibit the building of any church anywhere in reality. So maybe we can do that as a way of, asserting our sacredness. So, of course, that's completely ridiculous. Anyway, let me move on to the next one, the sanctity of marriage. You hear this a lot, especially with regard to same-sex marriage. That comes up a lot. We've talked a lot about same-sex marriage, so I don't want to delve into that too much. But this is mostly an excuse to meddle in the private relationships of others, as far as I can tell. And we talked, so there's this claim that God instituted marriage and only his pattern is to be followed. Here's one quote. It needs to be protected because nobody can separate man from woman joined by God, which I think is just hilarious because it's a complete non sequitur, right? If God is unable, if you can't separate a pair of people who joined by God, then why does it need protection? So I can't figure that out. Here's another quote from a position paper on the sanctity of marriage. In this position paper, we seek to think about marriage under the authority of the Lord Jesus Christ and God's written word, the Bible. We believe that God has revealed to all people in all cultures at all times a sense of morality and the ordering of human relationships. So here we have people sort of trying to co-opt other people's relationships for their God, and most people who have religious feelings would really resent the meddling of other folks in their relationships. So, but what about atheist marriages? For some reason, the religious people don't care about atheist marriages. If marriage is sanctified by God, why not prevent atheists from getting marriage? Well, one of the interesting things to point out is if you look at divorce rates for people who are currently or have previously been divorced, there's been a study by the Barna Research Group titled "The Christians are more likely to experience divorce than are non-Christians." And non-denominational Protestants are expected to have divorce rate of 34%, whereas atheists and agnostics are supposed to have a divorce rate of 21%. So I find that pretty interesting, and those numbers are statistically significant. So maybe what we should do is make, instead of religious counseling, we should convert everybody to atheism and we'll have better marriages. So this whole idea of a secular marriage is nonsense. So what about the tradition in the Bible? I mean, they're bringing up these traditions. What about the tradition of polygamy? There's lots of polygamy in the Bible. Why not have that if they want to use Bible quotes to support their position? What about laws preventing divorce? You never see that. You never see people, if they want to make marriages last longer, why not just prohibit divorce? And they claim that marriages are for procreation. Well, why not have mandatory laws that say you must produce so many kids? Well, none of these things are things that the religious folks are doing, which makes the whole question of sanctity of marriage, I think, under question. And in particular, they're picking on gays, and I think this is for two reasons. One is gays are unlikely to have relationships that are being used as a tool for procreation of believers. So the gays just aren't playing that game. And the other thing is that they've already sort of made gays an enemy, and the religious groups have used gays as a way of vilifying people to raise power and money. And so they're sort of on the wrong side already. And so this is just a continuation of that. So this whole sanctity of marriage thing is utter nonsense. It's just meddling in other people's relationships.
To your point about, why not just make divorce illegal, it may be the case that the reason that non-denominational Protestants have a higher divorce rate than, for example, other Christians is because there are Christian denominations where divorce is roughly the religious equivalent of illegal.
That's right.
You're just not.
That's right.
It's not an option. It's not discussed. It's not granted.
Yeah, the number for
except in
Catholics is a good bit lower. And
Yeah.
that's certainly one area where. That's right.
And then that's where we need to do a second study, which actually goes in detail, looks at, okay, how many people are currently living in marriages that they would rather be divorced or would be happier if they were divorced and are stuck being miserable because of their religious proclamations that marriage is some kind of sacred, holy.
It'd be nice to be able to get at that information, but that'd be a tough thing to tease out, wouldn't it? With all the other things going on. Well, let's shift gears a little bit to the sanctity of human life. You see this a lot, especially in the abortion debates. And I claim that this is a mechanism to claim other people's children, is to go after other people's children and try to speak for them and do them. Well, the Bible's very clear that a man's children, only the man, are his property. And that there's certainly a commandment not to covet other people's property. So clearly, there's no support in this speaking for other people's children, I don't think, in the Bible. What about God? Does he consider human life sacred? Well, the most common interaction of God in the Bible with humans is killing them. And if you flip through the Bible, you'll figure that out pretty quick. The second most common interaction, I believe, is ordering the killing of people. And then you get to conversations and these sorts of things. So God doesn't consider human life sacred very clearly. Do Christians consider human life sacred? Well, there's certainly the claim. What about the wars? What about wars? Well, Iraq and Afghanistan, we have maybe 600,000 Afghanis and Iraqis killed in this war, but you never hear about those. You only hear about American deaths. And I really have never heard too much religious folks claiming that we shouldn't be in this war, we should stop this war. Certainly not lately. This is going on and on. What about the long-term persecution and killing of Jews over centuries? Well, was that an evidence of sanctity of human life? I don't think so. What about life extension? We don't have Christians going and saying, oh, we should have longer lives and these sorts of things. What about cryogenics? No, they're not into that. What about cloning? Oh, that's a good one. Sanctity of human life, we can make more life. But it turns out there's religious prohibitions against cloning. And it's not for the reason you think. The reason, let me have a little diversion here, that the religions don't like cloning, is that cloning renders ridiculous the concept of the soul. So think about it. If I get cloned, either my clone has no soul, right, in which case we're creating soulless people running around like little zombies or whatever. And what happens when they turn out to be believers and they want to eat the crackers at communion, and they happen to behave morally just like everybody else? Well, then the whole religion concept that these people are different somehow kind of gets flushed down the toilet. The same sort of thing happened with IVF, in vitro fertilization, that they thought that these people wouldn't have souls, this sort of thing. What if my clone shares my soul? Well, what happens here is if he gets cloned and somebody else gets cloned, we got a whole string of people that supposedly share the same soul, and I'm no longer responsible for, or my soul is no longer responsible for what I do, right? So if I die, then I could be punished for all eternity for what my clone does, right? So this whole idea of responsibility goes out the window. Well, what if our clone has a soul? Well, then that puts humans in control of creating souls, and so it takes God out of the picture. So no matter how you slice this, the whole idea of soul is rendered silly by cloning. So that's why the religions hate that. So returning to the sanctity of human life, what's really going on? Well, religions want to co-opt reproduction to make more potential believers. It's that simple. We know, everybody knows and everybody admits that God can't make more followers, otherwise he'd do that. So reproduction has to be co-opted, and especially the womb, which is, pretty magic, what goes on in there. And that, if you can co-opt that, you can do pretty well as far as making more believers. So, and finally, the religions aren't able to control their own flock. They can't do it through their own religious strictures, so they have to use secular laws to create more believers, and I think that's a real travesty. So, the point here is that human life is sacred to the extent that the life has some benefit to religion. If you're old and have a lot of money, then maybe your life is they want to have you as a believer. If you're an Iraqi who happens to be Muslim, who cares? That's kind of how it works out. So I've talked about the sanctity of life, of marriage, of the World Trade Center, and it's just a mechanism to control or assert ownership over something else, and when you don't really have any basis for that assertion. So that's my deal. Please call in and expand on this or whatever. Tell me if I'm wrong.